Let's talk about It Ends, its ending, and what exactly does this mean. This is the latest film from Alexander Ulom, who has gone on to make probably one of the best films, I think, of the year. And this is a movie that had its premiere South by Southwest. I will tell you, like I said in my review, if you're not a fan of psychological thriller films, this isn't really a horror and the answers aren't as clear cut. It's more of a hangout movie and one to make you think. That was a little cringe that I did there. So in that regard, I think you'll appreciate it more if you're looking at it as a sort of standard horror film. I think you're going to be pretty pissed off, as I've seen a lot of people online. But let's talk about what this movie is about and its ending. The film basically follows four friends as they navigate a road that never ends, and they try to figure out what exactly is this road, why did they end up here, and who are these people that are just attacking them. And so throughout the whole film, we see as they are trying to find answers. Eventually, one of the friends, Tyler, he's just like, I give up. I don't want to go back to the car and keep driving endlessly. I'm staying here on the side. Y'all can go ahead and do this. Now, we see that Day and Fisher are two friends that are starting to get accustomed to the road. They've set up rituals. They've set up a sort of, like, you could say, schedule of doing things, whether that's going out and just having a scream to let out all of the frustrations that they're feeling. While the other friend, James, is like, no, there has to be a way out. I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to continue to drive and we're going to see how to get out of this like hell road that we're on. And the other friends are getting a little worried. They see that James is sort of starting to get consumed by this, and it's not healthy, right? It's not healthy for James to continue to think that there may be a way out and to continue to beat himself as he tries to figure it out and drive and drive and drive endlessly without stopping. James is like, no, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to continue. Day and Fisher are eventually left behind by James, who just drives and drives and drives until he eventually reaches the end. But the end is not what it seems, as it just says the road ends, as there are dozens of other cars there and they are just pretty much like nowhere to be found anybody else, right? And so James kind of has a bit of a breakdown. He doesn't know what to do anymore. He ends up eating the Cliff Bar that they say they weren't going to eat, and then he just gets back on the road and drives. He then takes an unconscious man out of a vehicle and puts him in the car with him as he drives and tries to start a chat with him, and the movie ends. And I thought it was an interesting way to showcase, I would say, existential dread. I think confusion on where your life goes. Alexander Ulom himself has talked about how this movie sort of represents how the younger generation feels about there sort of being this promise of, if you do this, if you go down this road, if you follow this path and all of this, eventually it's going to lead to this great thing, right? But a lot of times we see that maybe the promises of yesterday that people were promised when they were young aren't there anymore, right? Like the reward I think younger people in different generations received for doing things the right way, quote unquote, and sort of following the same path. You can't do that anymore. Like people aren't able to sort of go out and get the house. Everything that's promised, sort of like the sort of dream, right? Scenario, like you go to college and do all of these things right, and this is what's going to happen by the end of it. And it seems that I think in a capitalistic society and all of that, it's a little bit harder to navigate that now. But I think that that is what the road ultimately represents. And I think that Day and Fisher ultimately accepted that this road was never going to lead anywhere and that there was nothing really for them to pursue at the end. Instead, they chose to just experience the road, be happy, take out their frustrations whenever they needed to, and just live in the moment. Whereas James is always trying to look towards the end of the road and trying to figure it out. And you saw that he spent so many miles just driving endlessly while his head was just trying to figure out what was going on at the end of the road. He was never really in the moment with Day and Fisher. So he spent all of these moments a bit bitter, mad, confused, and just wanting to figure it out when he just couldn't. There is no explanation. There is no explanation. Instead of just fully embracing that he's alive, that he's with these two people that he is very close to, and yet not being able to fully be grounded in the moment with them. And I think it's a movie that has a lot to say about many different things. I think the existential dread really is maybe the main topic that Alexander is getting to here, that a lot of people feel, where they don't really know what their path is and where this path will lead. And that's kind of scary to think, right? And the worst thing is that you are endlessly going down this path and you're trying to figure it out. And in that process of trying to figure it out, that you might lose sight of what's around you and not be grounded and living in the moment anymore because you are so like into the destination, right? You are so into trying to figure out how to get there, how you're going to get there, and how is it going to feel when you get there instead of the journey. The journey is the best part because the journey is you growing, having these experiences, going through it. And I think that's ultimately what James didn't do, where Day and Fisher were with each other. They were their support. They were there. They didn't feel as lonely, I would say, as frustrated also as James because they adapted to it easier. I think James was on the verge of becoming the people that ultimately were in the woods that would come out to attack because they were confused. They didn't know how to get out of this and ultimately became part of the road itself. And they lost sight of themselves and their identity and just became a sort of like terror to others, but they were also scared. Overall, the themes and messages I got from the film by the end were that you definitely have to be in the moment in life. You have to stop thinking about what comes next, about where does this end, and just be present and appreciate every moment that you have. And that's, I think, what Alexander Ulam is getting to here at the end. James finally was able to do that when he realized what was at the end of the road. The road just ends, and he was able to drive back and just start appreciating and seeing life in a different manner. And I think that it was a very, very intense ending. I really enjoyed the film. The more I think about it after watching it, I will say, like I said, it is not a typical horror film. It is not a clear-cut answer film. It's not trying to be a simple one either, but at the end, it kind of is a simple one because it's just three friends driving down an endless road to start to appreciate the road for what it is and don't try to question it too much because there is no answer. The road is just the road and that's all it is, and it's endless, and they can just be on this hunt to find the end, to find the exit, but ultimately they've seen that it doesn't lead anywhere and they just started to appreciate being together and being in each other's company and just having their routine. Whereas James was really beating himself up about not being able to find the answers, and we ultimately saw that he just had to finally let go. I think James also finally having the scream that he didn't have throughout the whole film was him finally accepting what this reality is and being more grounded. We saw that he was a lot more calm after it because he's able to let the frustrations go. So he's not in his head only, he's now present, and hopefully in the future he might be able to just be happy with what it is. And I think that that is definitely what Alexander Ulam's getting here. I think another way you can also look at the film with its ending is that James finds that person and builds community, because James didn't have that anymore with Dane Fisher. You could kind of see the film as sort of entering adulthood, fresh out of college, and life changes. Life changes fast. They went on this road after a quick turn and eventually didn't come out of it anymore. And I think that's how life can change quickly. These four friends weren't friends anymore. They all had different ideas of what was going on. They all dealt with it a bit different, and ultimately one by one, they started to drift apart. Some were left behind, some were left in other situations they weren't at the beginning, and another one took a different route of sorts. And I think that's clearly how life goes, right? You start with these people that you ultimately think you're always going to be with, and then life takes its twists, its turns, and you're ultimately in a destination you never thought you'd be, just as James is now with one of these strangers, and something I don't think he thought he was going to do at the beginning, but ultimately after coming to the conclusion that the road just ends, he decides to just continue to admire and just appreciate what the road is now, and it's more about the journey than the destination for James now, which is very, very important. So I think he did an incredible job here with this film. Really a movie that makes you think about life and just appreciating the moments that you're in at the moment and just continuing on and not worrying too much about what is the meaning, what is the end, instead just being grateful that you're here. And I think it's beautiful what Alexander Ulam's doing. So Alexander Ulam basically spoke to Inverse and talked about the ending and what it really meant to him as well. And he had this to say: this generation has a very hyperactive nervous system, and I think that the alternative of being in the real world and trying to accomplish your goals or trying to move forward is this doom scroll feedback loop where you're just a hunger, you're just an instinct, and you're just getting fed by systems that don't really care about you and are actually actively trying to reduce you to just a hunger. The people know it's not even really their fault, it's just a lot of victims of circumstance and systems of powers that don't really give a fuck about an average 18-year-old. And it's just people who are lost and just trying to forage, they're just trying to get to the car. If the main characters are trying to find some semblance of structure, so are the people in the woods. So I thought that that was interesting because yes, these people are indeed just trying to find a way out, and I feel like because they're just stuck in the loop of the doom scroll, as Oolong says, and I thought that that definitely makes me want to revisit the film and see these things from his perspective as well. So when asked about the ending of the film and how there is just an end of the road, this is what Ulam had to say. The road ends because of James. That is all I will say about that. The road ended because that's what he needed to happen for James specifically. He says it's an optimistic ending. Once he hits that dead end, he's free. He's going back. And I think that that definitely is a way to see it. Like I said, James at the very end is able to finally scream like his friends Day and Fisher were doing, and he's able to fully be grounded now, even taking on a new passenger, a stranger he meets, and trying to form a new community, a new connection, and now finally appreciating what this road really is. So overall, I really appreciated its ends. I think it's a great film, and I'm excited to see what Alexander does next with a bigger budget. This was, I believe, under 200,000 to make, so definitely a pretty great film at that. But let me know your thoughts, your opinions on the ending. Do you have a different interpretation of the ending? Let me know below. I believe Alexander's talked about the ending, which I'll link below as well if you want to check that out. These were just some of my initial thoughts, and I just wanted to get them out there. Make sure you subscribe and hit that follow button so you don't miss out. Check us out on our other social medias if you want some other content that we put out. But as always, that is going to do it for me. I'll see you next time. 50,000 subscribers is the goal. Stay safe, stay positive.